On today's episode, we have Jody Balaban joining us with Frieden Wealth to share his expertise related to family financial planning and tips for all stages of life. Welcome, Jody. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
This is such an important topic, and sometimes, it can be a bit of a difficult topic for people to, discuss at home amongst themselves. Finances are always a thing. For people. So sometimes it can be difficult. So today, hopefully we can share some information to help, lighten that load for families and make it easier for them is kind of the goal.
Absolutely.
But before I start drilling you with financial questions, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I grew up here in Hampton Roads. I'm married, have 3 children. I've been doing financial services for about 20 plus years at this point.
Wow.
So after college, did something else for a couple of years, and then ultimately knew I wanted to come back here. My major in college was family financial planning. So
Oh, great.
was ready to put the major to work. So
Yeah.
So I've been back ever since.
Okay, wonderful. That sounds great. I didn't realize you had 3 kids. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. You're making me feel old. All right. So let's just start with a simple, easy one to get us going. Can you just kind of give us an overview of your approach to financial planning for families for, any stage of life?
Sure. It's not a one size fits all. I mean, everybody has different wants and needs. So it's important to sit down and just have basically just frank conversations and honest conversations about what ultimately is the end goal. There's no right or wrong way, and there's multiple ways to put a plan together.
Yeah.
But ultimately it starts with kind of what we call a fact finder, where we sit down, see what you want to accomplish, get all the pertinent financial information, and then come up with a plan or a couple different types of plans to help get to the end result.
Okay. So do you recommend that couples do this when they're young, when they're just starting out, that they sit down with a financial planner and have a conversation early in life, or what do you typically see?
Yeah, I think like anything, the earlier the better.
Okay.
I mean, especially from a retirement standpoint, no one ever said I had too much money in retirement. Typically, unfortunately, it's the reverse of that. So
Yeah.
it's always good to plan something. Starting something is better the earlier you can do it, because
Okay.
from an investing standpoint, you have compounding interest on your side. So
Right.
the earlier the better with that. And then also just to plan ahead, if I do have children, what does that look like? If,
Yeah.
we're renting now, if we were to buy a house, how would that impact us? How much do we need to save? So there's a lot of moving parts to putting a plan together and figuring out, okay, this is where I am today. Where do I want to be 5, 10, 15 years in the future? And what's the best way to get there?
Okay. That makes sense. All right. So tell me some key financial considerations for young families, what they should focus on as they're just starting out. They're new in their career. They're probably, just beginning to make some, some sort of salary for the first time. And what do you recommend to those families?
Yeah, so in that case, the most important thing I would say is try to plan for your future. In that case, that includes retirement. So if you have a retirement plan through your employer, try to max that out as much as possible. Definitely try to max it out at least to the match that the company is providing, if they're providing a match, because that's free money. So
Right.
regardless of what the market does, you not putting the match in or putting the most that they get the match, you're turning away free money. So
Right.
that would be the first thing. People ask all the time, am I better off doing a Roth IRA, a Roth contribution, or traditional? And that really just depends on how you want to do it. There's no right or wrong way. There's no book answer that's going to tell you this is how you should do it. But depending how old you are, taxes are probably going to go up at some point in the future. So
Yeah.
if you don't mind taking the tax hit today, it's good to put some of that money in the Roth, because then you have 2 different taxable buckets of money at retirement, one that's tax-free.
Yeah, later in life.
Right,
Yeah, that's
and-
something I plan to
right.
talk to you about, as a
Yep.
matter of fact. But they also, don't you always tell people, especially when they're young, put the maximum contribution into your retirement from day one, because if you don't, you're going to get used to that money. You're going to live on that money. You're going to spend that money, and it's so much harder to then max it out. I mean, I've heard that so many times.
That's very true. People tend not to miss the money if it's going in the plan.
Yeah.
So, years ago, I went to a conference and they talked about human nature. And the way that they described it, they did a test, and I think it was in Austria. It was Austria and Germany, I believe. And they basically had 2 different countries as far as how those the people in those countries were organ donors.
Okay.
One country was an automatic organ donor, the other was not. And they found out that the country that was an automatic organ donor, the people didn't change the organ donor. status. So most of them were organ donors.
Okay.
And the study showed by nature, humans just tend to be inherently lazy, may not be the best word, but kind of take the path of least resistance. So when it comes to your retirement planning, if you can put more in, or if your plan has the ability to do like a step ahead program so that every year it's automatically going to go up 1% or whatever you might like it to be, you're not going to miss that money. But if you start off and put the least amount that you can put in, it's going to be psychologically more difficult in the future to take that hit to move it. So if you're used to putting money in, as your income does grow, you're just going to be used to putting more into it, which is, again, it's going to be a good path for a successful retirement.
Makes sense. Okay, so how do you help families set realistic and achievable financial goals in the short term and in the long term? So you're meeting with a young family. What are some realistic short-term things you usually suggest, as well as maybe some long-term thoughts?
So there's an old adage of needs, wants, and wishes. So it's kind of good to compartmentalize, what do you need to live today? Like what is an absolute I need for housing, for food, whatever it might be, to make sure you have those resources covered.
Okay.
And then honestly just make a list of what are my wants and what are my wishes, and to help put a plan together for that, to see, all right, how much do I need? Maybe I need a new car in a couple years. How much should I be putting away now so that I don't have a higher monthly payment in the future? Or if I am renting and I want to potentially buy a house, how much should I be putting away? When should I be looking at, getting a loan? What are interest rates? Things of that nature. So
we don't even want to talk about what interest rates are right now, although I hear they're coming down.
They are coming down. My wife is a loan officer, so I hear about it consistently. But yeah, a lot of it is just a process of putting pen to paper or using a computer program and seeing, what do I have today? Realistically, what do I need to put away for those wants and wishes? And, from an emergency standpoint, you should probably have 3 to 6 months of those needs covered, not necessarily your salary, but to cover those needs should something happen, to make sure you have 3 to 6 months of a reserve to make sure you're not in a bind should something negative happen.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. How about budgeting strategies? Do you have any budgeting strategies that you tailor to families with children specifically that we could kind of share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I think all of us like to spoil our children if at all possible.
Yeah.
But it's also good to understand there's only but so many things, so many toys they need or things like that. So to try to put into context, am I better off living for today, putting money away so that in the future I've got money, whether it's for private schooling or higher education, whether it's a vocational school or college, whatever that might be.
Right.
But to set a budget every month, because it's very easy to get off track. So it's good. And I remember, my parents, when I was a kid, taking their check register and balancing it every month.
Nobody does that anymore, but yes, I used to do that too.
But it was a way that you could keep track of your finances. Now everything's digital online, so to use technology as your friend and as a resource, probably wherever somebody banks has a budgeting tool that they can use.
That's true.
Many of the retirement plan providers have a budgeting tool on their websites, whether you're in your 401k or your 403b, to take advantage of those. Or there's tons of free ones online you can just be a part of. So what I would say is just set a goal of, this is how much I need to live off of every month. And then what do I want for my children? What needs do they have in the future? Whether it's, I have friends now that they have kids that are playing travel sports, and it's really expensive to take them all across the country. It is so expensive.
I remember that my kids were into travel soccer, and it was, it really gets up there, especially when you're going somewhere, every other week, and you have to pay for the hotel and the food and all that goes along with it. So it's not just the sport.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So there's a lot of activities extracurricular that kids are a part of today.
Yeah.
So it's important to budget, make sure that you can provide those resources to them, but also stay within a budget so that you don't wreck the rest of the financial plan.
Yeah. I think also it's just a good idea to, I would call it, set a monthly financial meeting, for you and your spouse.
Yeah.
Like once a month, sit down and look at, what did you do this month? Did you meet your goals? Did you exceed your budgets? Mm-hmm. Just what happened? Just review the previous month and talk about it, because the more you do things like that and the more you talk about it, the less it is a stressful conversation, because you're both on the same page. I hear all the time people saying that, they don't want to talk to their spouse about finances because, they get angry and it turns into an argument. But I find that if you just talk about it on a regular basis, hey, this is what we did last month. Hey, we kind of overspent on that because we wanted to go out of town, or, I needed some new clothing, or whatever it might be. I paid for a new gym membership. I paid for a personal trainer. I don't know what it could be. But if you just are, you talking to each other about it on a regular basis, I think you do a better job of trying to meet your goals, meet your budget or your short or long-term goals, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, every household's different.
Yes.
But communication is very important. So to make sure whether, like you said, whether it's monthly, quarterly, whatever that might be, we have some clients who do it annually. They just sit down and say, all right, let's look at it. What subscriptions do we have that maybe we're not using anymore?
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
It's a very simple thing to just look at. But it's good to reconcile and to also be on the same page. You may not agree with how much the budget should be each month, but you should at least try to stay within reason.
Yeah.
And have a
My husband is
conversation.
always talking about those sneaky subscriptions. He's like, we have too many subscriptions to things. We need to get rid of some of them. And I'm sure he's right. But yes, talking about it on a regular basis is probably a really good idea. You mentioned it a little bit, but let's talk about an emergency fund. How important is it to have emergency fund as part of your financial strategy?
I think it's critical because, we live in a world where not everything goes the way that you hope that it goes. So things happen, whether it's something breaks in your house or your car breaks down or, God forbid, you have a medical issue.
Yeah.
So it's very important to put, like I said, 3 to 6 months away for that rainy day.
So not necessarily 3 to 6 months of salary, which I think is what I've heard people say before, but you're saying 3 to 6 months of your needs, whatever.
You definitely want to cover what your basic living needs are. If you can do 3 to 6 months of your salary, that's even better. But you want to make sure I've covered my housing costs, I've covered food, clothing, gas, utilities, whatever that might be, to make sure that's at least covered. But you're correct. If you can do 3 to 6 of your salary, that's even better.
Okay. That's good advice. So next on my list, how do you approach education funding for children? And what options do you typically recommend, for saving for private school or saving for college? The use of the 529 plan, which a couple of years ago, I want to say it might have been 2017, but I don't quote me.
It is 2017.
They finally started allowing people to use a 529 to pay for K-12 tuition. So what are your thoughts on that?
So that depends on the household and the resources of the household.
Yeah.
I will say from a K through 12 perspective, we don't have a ton of clients who utilize the 529 plans for K through 12 for private schools. And I think it's more of probably a function of people just don't know about it or, not to say the wealth of people that go to private schools, but many times those families have enough money where they're not investing the money to pay for the funding.
Yeah.
But it is a great way if you have the ability to put money away. I think you can take up to $10,000 a year for K through 12.
Yeah, which is amazing. And I think you're
great.
right. I think a lot of people don't realize that they can do it. So,
yeah. So, but again, that's involved in the initial planning of where do I want my kids to go to school? Do I have, do I have public school options? Or if I don't, I'd rather them go to a private school. And if so, how do I budget accordingly for that?
Okay.
And so if you're comfortable investing in the market and knowing that that money could go up, but at the same time it could go down, just to understand the risks and rewards, so to speak, of the 529 plan. But it's great from a tax deferral perspective of the money's going to grow tax-free.
Yeah, and I think
higher education.
Yeah, I think grandparents and relatives can also contribute to a 529 too.
Yeah,
so
anybody can.
You as the parent could set it up, but others can donate to their grandchild's 529.
We have clients that the grandparents just add to the account that the parents set up, or we have grandparents set up the own accounts.
Oh, okay.
Because the nice thing about the 529 plan is, let's say you set it up for one child and that child gets a scholarship or they don't go to college.
Right.
It can just roll over to another family member, and it doesn't have to be a sibling. It can be a cousin, whatever it might be.
Okay.
Or they recently just changed the law with the Secure Act. It could be used for a Roth IRA in the future as well. So
okay.
It's a great planning tool.
That's nice. I didn't even know all of that. Okay, so how about families with teenagers? What advice would you give regarding teaching financial literacy? This is a big thing to me.
Right. So I think it just follows the same guidelines of being a parent and setting good examples for your children. So obviously when we go out and we purchase things, they have eyes, they can see what we do.
Yeah, they know what you're doing.
Right. But it's also a probably good idea to teach them a budget. So whether they have an allowance or not, what they're doing to work for that allowance, that's up to each household. But to give them a budget,
to
let them understand this is how much you get. You need to make it work. I remember as a kid when I was a teenager, to date myself, I mean, gas was, I feel like it was under $1 a gallon. And I got $20 a week. And that was enough to fill up my tank and go
So
with my
you
friends
budgeted
and
your gas money.
Yeah, that's how it had to work. But it's good to learn early because as you get older, it's harder to break bad habits, especially financial habits.
Yeah.
So if you're used to just spending and not having any guardrails,
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea to help children create their own budget and figure out how to manage their own money. Interestingly, today most kids don't even know how to write a check. And most of them don't write checks,
Correct.
which is like just an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like my own kids, who are adults, really, they're not kids, but they don't write checks. I made them get checkbooks because sometimes you have a situation where that's the only thing they'll accept, but they really never write checks.
Yeah.
And young kids in school today, like fifth graders, let's use as an example, they don't know anything about how to write a check. So, or to look at a bank statement or a register, or just taking the time to do something like that with kids, I think is important, just to show them, hey, this is what a bank statement looks like, and this is what you're looking for. And this is how you make sure that, you have enough money in your bank account. This is how you reconcile a bank statement, even though I realize no one does that anymore.
Right.
But still,
Yeah.
it's something good to learn about.
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's good to learn early, like I said. It's good to learn, how credit cards work.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when I was in college, my dad told me never sign up for a credit card. You've got a credit card through us, we're co-signed. But as a college student, you could sign up for a credit card.
Yes.
I mean, they would prey on college kids, unfortunately, because they knew the interest was absurdly high and kids are going to use it.
Yeah, that's true. The flip side of that, I would say, is that you do need your young adults to start developing their own credit history.
Correct.
And if they don't have something, the co-signing thing, I think, would probably
Right.
suffice.
Yes, it
but
would.
if they don't have something, then it becomes very difficult for them when they get out of school to buy a car or rent an apartment or any of those things
Yes.
that, you want those young adults to do. So there's two sides to that, but I think the way your parents did it was probably smart, because they gave you something that, they knew was safe, and
Right.
they were the co-signers on.
Because you hear, horror stories. Somebody racked up $25,000, $30,000 of credit card debt, and they
Yeah.
can't pay it, and the interest rate's double digits, and it's hard to get out from under that. So
Yeah, and they probably don't understand how difficult it's actually going to be to pay that credit card
correct.
back.
So everyone uses credit cards differently.
Yeah.
Some people use it because they don't have the resources to pay for everything at that time, or some people use it, quite honestly, just as a debit card, and they get the bonus points from whatever.
Yeah, and then you can use them to
Yeah.
pay for things, or go on trips or travel, or there's all
Yeah.
kinds of
So
rewards programs.
ideally, everyone likes to be debt free. So if that's part of the goal, then you plan for that accordingly in the financial plan.
Okay. Let's see. How do you address unique challenges and opportunities that arise for families with adult children, kind of like what we were just talking about, planning for weddings, home purchases, assisting with grandchildren's education? We've kind of touched on a little bit of it, but is there
Right.
anything else you think you would add to that conversation?
Just that, again, I mean, the financial plan in your life, it's a moving target. So
Exactly.
you can certainly settle and say, look, I've got this asset that I'm going to use for college, and then the child may not go to college, or I'm going to use this for my child's wedding, and maybe they don't get married. So it's good just to pivot, but also have different buckets of money assigned to different goals that you have in place, but also make sure that money's liquid, so that if you need to get to it, you don't have taxable consequences that you necessarily don't want, or penalties because you're taking it out, if it's in a retirement account before 59 and a half.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
No,
You
but
definitely don't want to do that.
yeah, you basically just want flexibility, but also know that you can't always necessarily do what you want. You may not have that lavish wedding for one night that fits in your budget, but to remember, it's still a happy day and it's a good
Yeah.
event. But you don't have to spend $100,000.
No, you
on a
really
wedding,
don't
so,
have to. But so I guess basically people need to have sort of a well-rounded plan, portfolio, whatever word you want to use, which would include a formal retirement, but you should also have other types of investments, whether it's stocks, or it's property, or whatever it might be, and whatever your capacity is, of course. But isn't it better to have some other options besides
Yes,
just the strict
it's
retirement?
great to be diversified,
Okay.
and whatever that means to you.
Okay.
I mean, if you're a real estate type person and you like to own real estate and flip houses or have rental properties, that's a great source of income. It's mailbox money. It's just coming to you every month, but that comes with the headache of now I'm a landlord.
Right,
and
exactly.
If the water heater breaks, I have to have the money there to fix the water heater, or
Yeah.
replace the water heater.
Right.
So, but again, just diversification, whether it's in your retirement plan, have a passive asset such as, a real estate development type project or rental properties, or just invest in the stock market in a
Yeah, or
non-qualified
CDs
plan.
even,
Yeah, whatever
you
it
know.
might be. I mean, you look at interest rates now, you can go to really none of the brick and mortar banks, but so many banks online, you can get a 5%, 5.5% interest on just a savings account.
Yeah,
It's great.
true.
It's free money. So
High yield savings or something
Yep.
like that. One of my kids is doing that right now. He's like telling me all these different accounts he has now that he's just
Oh, yeah.
putting some in for, here and there. So who knows?
Yeah,
He'll probably do very well one day.
yeah, it's great.
Okay, how about planning for unexpected events, such as illness or disability? And I mean, how does like insurance play into that? I guess one of the thoughts that enters my mind is you've always heard people talk about, and I don't know that I have the right term, but isn't there some sort of critical illness plan or I forgot the right term for it, but it's when you're older and it's
Yes,
like
there's critical illness, there's long-term care. Which
maybe it was
may be what you're
long-term care
referring
insurance
to.
that I'm talking about. What do you think
Yeah.
about those types of things?
I think they're critical.
Okay.
On the long-term care side, and we can kind of jump around to other life stages, but long-term care, you've worked for so many years, you've built up a nice nest egg, and then unfortunately we all get old. Hopefully, when it does come for us to pass away, hopefully it's quick and it's not painful and
Yeah.
you're not a drain on your family. But for those, if you have a dementia-related disorder or you get older and you're frail, you need help.
Right.
And many times that's expensive. And most people, if they can help it, would rather stay out of a facility. They would rather stay in their home. Home health care here in Hampton Roads is about $22 an hour for a
Wow.
PRN. So that adds up.
Yeah.
And so you need long-term care for two reasons. One, you don't want to be a financial drain on your family. And also to protect your income and assets that you've worked for so many years. You don't want to just turn that and give that to a nursing home
Right.
provider. And two, you don't want to be a burden on your family from just a time standpoint, because most grown adults, they have their own family. They have their young kids and they're trying to plan for their college or
Right.
their education or their own retirement. And so that may not be feasible to take care of mom and dad. And also the third kind of step to that as well is the spouse. Many times it's the husband who needs care first. So the wife usually is not as big as the husband. And now if they're physically
trying to help them
a grown
physically.
man around,
Yeah.
then it becomes a detriment to her health. So you want to plan for long-term care. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but typically standalone long-term care has kind of gone away.
Okay.
The insurance companies just actuarially just took a bath on it, and they've just priced it accordingly now. And there's many companies that don't even offer standalone long-term care anymore. So what most people do is they buy some sort of life insurance policy that has a long-term care rider on it.
Okay.
And it kind
Interesting.
of takes away the negative connotation of long-term care, because for many years people said, well, what if I don't use this policy?
Yeah.
And the goal is, I don't ever want you to use this policy. When your time comes, I hope it's quick and painless and that's it.
Yeah.
But the objection was always, well, I paid all this money into it. And so now with the life insurance, with a rider for long-term care, somebody is going to receive, benefit's not a great word, but they're
Right.
either going to get the death benefit from the proceeds of the life insurance when you pass away, or you can use it for the long-term care expenses, or a combination of both if there's money left in the policy when you pass away. So
Okay.
it's a great product that helps preserve the assets that you probably want to pass on to your wife or children or charity, whatever it might be, versus giving it to a home health care or nursing home provider.
So what age do you recommend that people start thinking about a policy like that?
So it differs per family. Most people end up looking at long-term care when it hits them at home, when they have a family member or
Yeah.
a friend of a family member that is going through it.
Okay.
But I would say probably in your 40s is probably a good time to look at it, because it is, like I said, if you're going to buy it with life insurance, the older you get, the more expensive life insurance or long-term care becomes.
Right.
So the earlier you can look into it, the better. And with long-term care, something is better than nothing.
Okay.
We have no clue what it's going to look like when it comes time for you to even need the policy. So not everyone needs 24-hour-a-day home care in their house. So you always just want to get something that's going to protect part of your assets,
Okay.
and hopefully you don't need it. But if you do, you want to have enough that's there so you're not liquidating your entire portfolio.
Okay. That sounds good. So basically you're saying look at this type of insurance before you have an event.
Yeah, because once you're unhealtly, there's nothing you can do
can't
about
get it, can you?
Correct.
That's what I figured you would
Yes.
say. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I gotta love insurance.
But you mentioned, from a younger standpoint, if you're in your 20s and your 30s, or even in your 40s, not talking about long-term care, and you have kids or you're married, life insurance is critically important, because no one likes to think about it. But if you're the breadwinner and you're not there anymore, how is your family going to survive?
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily, your spouse may not want to move out of the house. They want to have the flexibility to stay in that house. Or if you are the breadwinner and your spouse passes away and maybe he or she is a stay-at-home parent, now you need the money to hire a nanny or have the kids go somewhere during the day.
Right.
Where's the money going to come from that? And then from a financial perspective, as far as income, you want to protect that with a disability policy. And many times through work, there's probably some sort of group disability that's there.
Yeah.
But that may not be sufficient. It's important to look at what those policies cover. But if you're a doctor, lawyer, you know, salesperson, whatever it might be, if you work for yourself, it's important to probably look at an individual disability policy, because that's going to replace roughly 60% of your income should you become disabled. Because once you're disabled, you more than likely can't do your own job. But if you could go do something else, most disability policies are written with what's called a own occupation definition of disability.
Okay.
So in your case, let's say you can't be head of school anymore for whatever reason that is, but you know, for lack of a better, you could go work at Walmart and be a greeter.
Right.
That disability policy is still going to pay you 60% of your income, and you'll still earn the money from, in this case,
That's
being
great.
a greeter at Walmart. So when you're looking at a budget, it's just important to sit down and say, okay, this is everything that we're trying to work towards. What could derail that? And like you said, health is typically one of those things, or unfortunately someone does pass away early. That does happen, to plan for that and build those insurance policies within the budget.
So I guess that kind of goes into the next question that I had, and that's really just estate planning. All the things we're talking about, is that kind of part of estate planning, or talk about?
Yeah, I mean, estate planning can mean many different things.
Okay.
I mean, when you hear estate planning, most people think the estate tax and how much do I have to give to the government if my assets are over a certain amount. But estate planning could just be something as simple as middle America, husband and wife, 2 kids. Should something happen to us, do we want to set up a trust so
Okay.
that the kids are taken care of? You know, do we want to do any charitable planning, and how can we go about doing that? So estate planning is used for a couple different reasons. You know, one is to protect assets from taxes, if you are in the upper end of the estate tax
Right.
situation. But it's also, if God forbid something happens to one of us, you know, you don't want to name your 4-year-old child the beneficiary of your retirement plan.
Yeah.
The court's not going to give them any money. They're going to set a guardian. So be proactive, name a trust.
Yeah.
And so then the trust is going to dictate when that child can receive the money and how they're going to receive that money and when. So it's important to do estate planning. Many of the companies now on the 401k side offer free will prep and free,
That's nice.
and I don't want to call it estate planning, but you can do all your documents online, whether it's medical directives, power of attorneys, things like that. So it's good to do that. Not everyone needs to go to an attorney and spend, you know, a couple $1,000s to do an estate plan.
Right.
Many times those documents are available online, and if you have a pretty straightforward estate
Situation.
plan situation, you can do all those documents, fill them out, and then you just take them to a notary to get notarized.
I think it's also important to remember that estate planning changes over time, you know, because I'm thinking about, like, when my kids were younger, we named certain people in our family to be the executors because our kids were minors. And as, you know, my kids have gotten older, that's all changed, and now they're the executors. And, you know, so you have to remember that whatever you created, you know, in your 30s has to be updated as time goes on.
It's critically important not to, you know, to fall back on the insurance side too. Beneficiaries.
Yeah.
You know, people get married, they get divorced, they forget sometimes to change, or your
Yeah.
spouse passes away, or maybe you named a child as your beneficiary and they don't need to be your beneficiary anymore. So it's always good to check that. It's always good, even for your bank accounts. Who do they have listed as your beneficiary, so to speak?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Everything has to be continuously looked at and updated. And I think that's why it's good to consider a financial planner, because if you go to someone, you know, even if it's just once a year, it gives you the opportunity to talk about all of these things that, you know,
Yes.
insurance, retirement, estate planning, 529s, all these things, because there's so much to it. And most people, you know, that's not their forte, you know, so they don't know that they should have whole life insurance plus retirement, plus this, plus that. They're just worried about paying the mortgage, paying the bills, making sure the kids are happy, making sure everybody's fed, you know, all those kind of things. They're not really spending energy and time thinking about a full financial plan for their entire lives. So,
Yeah, that's correct.
you know, I mean, myself included, of course, but I think it's important for everybody to think about doing it as early as they can in life, because you have more time to grow your your plan and your estate and your assets. So
Yeah, and you've put a foundation in place also. So, like I said, the earlier you can start building that foundation, the better you're going to be in the long run.
yeah, absolutely. And teaching your children about it. Financial literacy for kids, I think, is really important. In fact, I just went to a conference where they presented this whole lesson plan about financial literacy for, I think it was 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, which I would love to see implemented here at our school. And hopefully we will see that in the next year or two. But it just shows them all the kinds of things I was talking about. What is a credit card? What is a bank statement? What is an interest rate? What is a savings account? What is a check? How do I fill it out? All those things. So,
yeah. It's invaluable. As I mentioned, my major in college was family financial planning. And when I was in college, that major really wasn't widely known throughout the country.
Yeah.
And I kind of, had friends, and even myself wasn't exactly sure 100% what I wanted to do, but I knew this major would serve me well, even if I went into something completely different, because it would give me that understanding of how does insurance work, or what are credit, just the whole 9 yards for me personally.
Yeah.
So it was beneficial. But you're absolutely right. The earlier you can teach children financial literacy, the better.
All right. Well, I think this has been extremely informative, and I really, really appreciate you sharing all of this with us and with our listeners. Your expertise is amazing, and I'm sure people could really benefit from it. If any of our listeners are interested in reaching out to you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So you could call our office. The number is 757-340-9777, and I'm at extension 317, or you can always email me. It's the letter J and then Balaban, B as in boy, A-L-A, B as in boy, A-N, at Frieden, F-R-I-E-D-E-N, wealth.com.
Okay, great. And also, we will make sure we put that on our website with this episode. So for anybody who wasn't able to write all that down, don't worry. You can go to the website and you can get Jody's information if you'd like to set up a meeting with him to talk about financial planning. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Please give us your feedback on our podcast. If you found value in today's episode, we hope you will like, subscribe, share, and follow us. You can also visit our website at www.strelitzinternationalacademy.org for more information about this episode as well as other episodes, previous episodes. And remember, it takes a whole community to build a strong foundation for our children to grow and develop. On behalf of SIA, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your partnership.